lipids, which are fats, proteins, which we know are configurations of amino acids. And finally, we have a very specialized amino acid called nucleic acids. And this is what makes up your DNA. Again, in our next chapter, I think it's chapter 4, we're going to talk about DNA and why do we have these specialized amino acids and what do they do? Who bonds with who? How do we get the sequence and all of that good stuff? So these 4 categories are the organic molecules. Organic meaning there is hydrocarbon in the molecule. Then we just kind of did a bzzz across our organic molecules. Carbohydrates are made of sugars. We can have multiple sugars bonded together. So if I have a single molecule, the word one medical term is mono. So this is a 1 sugar monosaccharide. If I have 2 sugars, that would be disaccharide. And if I have more than 2, is a polysaccharide. Again, we're not going to go into super detail in this because we're going to hit this pretty hard in nutrition.
You know what helps me remember that? I know this is probably off subject or kilter, but you know how you can get mono if you give someone sugar, like a kiss? So I just thought that's how I put it together.
That's funny. That's funny. We can also have some of these molecules bonding with other molecules of different types. For example, here we have a glycoprotein, which would be a sugar and a protein bonded together. And then here we had just some regular terminology. Anabolism, med term, guys. Med term is used throughout to build up, cata, to break down. So if you have not eaten breakfast, you are catabolizing your own body tissue, you're breaking down your own body tissue. When you work out or you eat so much food that you exceed the amount of energy that you need for the day, well then suddenly you are anabolizing, you're building up. All right, here we had our lipids, which are fats. There are 4 different types. We didn't really touch on these. I'm just going to kind of peruse through. We've all heard the term triglyceride. And our fats are 2 different categories, saturated and unsaturated. You probably heard these that, oh, stay away from saturated fats.
You kind of got stuck.
Okay, so we have 2 different primary categories of our fats and fatty acids. We have saturated, you probably heard like, stay away from saturated fatty acids. Oh, it's not that they're super bad for you. The thing is with saturated is that they have nothing but single bonds. So it's super, super easy for our bodies to break them down. And we don't use very much energy to do that, which means that I have a ton of energy left over. And where do you think any extra energy and calories goes? Straight to that COVID-20. And so it's not so much that saturated fats are bad for you. You do need fat in your diet. It's just you're more likely to put on weight. Unsaturated is going to have a double bond. Polyunsaturated is going to have more than 1 double bond. So here we have a picture of our saturated, nothing but saturated, single bonds. Here we have 1 double bond, which would be unsaturated. And sometimes we'll even go further and describe it as monounsaturated, meaning 1 double bond. Phospholipids, this is a phosphorus and a fat. And in fact, this is the next chapter we go into, which is kind of the skin of the cell. It is going to allow things to pass back and forth through the cell. It's called the phospholipid bilayer. And so it's the skin of the cell. And we have a hydrophilic and hydrophobic end. So hydrophilic meaning I love water, and hydrophobic, I hate water. And so this is what helps to regulate the fat and the water content going in and out of the cell. Steroids, we talked a lot about steroids the very first week you were here. Specifically, this guy, cortisol, which is kind of your stress steroid. And so that is considered to be a category of fat is in your steroids. Again, we're not going into detail. Eicosanoids, I'm not even getting into this one. This is just a different structure of our fat. And eicosanoids help with things like platelets, inflammation. You guys are going to get into this in detail when you go into clinical pathology and disease management. So here we had our proteins, the most abundant molecule in the whole body, and it is composed of amino acids. As I said, all of these structures are made of a complex bonding of Legos. They're all made of Legos. And what our bodies have to do is then break down and pull apart the Legos and prepare the Legos to go out and build something else. Can't make something out of Legos if the Legos are already making something. So that's kind of what our whole GI system is meant to do. It's just break down these chains of Legos. These are all of our amino acids. All of our amino acids, some of them are what we call essential, meaning that you do need to take them in your diet. Some of them are non-essential, meaning your body can make them for themselves and you don't have to take them in your diet. Don't furiously write down this list. Do not. We're going to be talking about these again in nutrition. Here we just went over a whole review on the shape and the folding properties of our proteins. All right, so here's another type of protein. This is some new information now. Structural proteins are exactly what they sound like. They stabilize stuff, they are rigid, they provide structure. And so where we find these is in areas that have either need strength, like framework, like for example, our fingernails, our toenails, our claws, our horns, our antlers, or areas that are prone for a lot of stretch and wear and tear, like this part of your elbow. Did you all know that here's a little bit of trivia. You know this little bit of loose skin right here on your elbow? Did you all know that's called the venous? Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's called the venous.
Yep.
The term for the loose skin when you open your arm, when you extend your arm, this loose skin on your elbow it's the medical term for it is the venous. So
Someone found that out when I was in middle school. So the thing in middle school was like, oh my God, your weenus is showing. So
Yes.
Yeah, when I was in elementary school, we used to run up and jeans.
yeah. So that's your venous. We also have structural proteins, specific proteins called actin and myosin. We're going to get into this when we get into the muscles, but super, super cool. So the way that your muscles work is you have these fibers, and the fibers at rest are kind of just apart from each other like this. They're kind of interwoven. And then something magic happens, and these two proteins ratchet over each other, causing the muscle to contract towards the middle. And then something else happens and it causes it to relax and unratchet. And that's how your muscles work. They just constantly ratchet back and forth, contracting towards the middle and relaxing, contracting towards the middle and relaxing. And the two proteins responsible for that are actin and myosin. So those are our structural, they provide structure. Keratin in our claws, collagen in our skin and connective tissue, actin and myosin causing our muscles to contract. So all of this is providing a structure. That's why they're called structural proteins. Then we have something called a functional protein, which by definition has some sort of function in the body. Hence the name. Finally, somebody got an easy name for us. Some of these functional proteins, they'll include hormones. Now, when I say the word hormone, you probably immediately go to the two hormones that you're most familiar with: testosterone, estrogen. But honestly, hormones govern every aspect of your being. Hormones are what turns stuff on, turns stuff off. They do everything from regulating your organ function to regulating your metabolism to providing your nervous system with the energy to either fight or run, feed. Everything is governed by hormones. Even your ability to use other nutrients, governed by hormones. We talked yesterday the definition of our antibodies. That's our little wanted poster. So when you go and finally get your vaccine, hopefully everybody's going to go and get their COVID vaccine. So when you get your vaccine, it tricks your body into thinking it's going through a war. And so your immunity group is taking notes. How do we destroy it? How do we destroy it? But the really cool thing about this type of vaccine, if you'll give me a minute, because this is really neat, is this is called a recombinant RNA vaccine, which is super exciting. Because not in the past, if you have ever had the flu shot, I got the flu shot once and it made me so sick. Holy smokes, I nearly had to go into the hospital because the flu shot itself, now the flu shot can't give you the flu, okay? It's a modified vaccine. But my body reacted to it so violently that I can't take the flu vaccine anymore. And that's how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to fool your body into thinking that you have the flu, because all of the symptoms that you get with the flu have nothing to do with the virus. They have everything to do with your body's reaction to the virus. The fever, the chills, the fluid in your lungs, all of it is your body's reaction. If we can temper that reaction and provide some wanted posters, then all the better. But the new COVID is called a recombinant RNA vaccine. So not only is it fooling your body into thinking that you have it and you're going to fight it off, but it has a little extra manual. It has a little how-to, a DIY, if you will. And so when you get the vaccine, this little ticker tape of instructions goes immediately to your immune system and teaches it, hey, you don't have to figure out how to kill this thing on your own. Here are the instructions that you need. And that's why people are reporting such minor symptoms associated with this vaccine. I don't know if I froze. We got way down deep. We're rewatching the series of show called House. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's a medical show that you can find. I don't know if it's on Netflix. It might be. If you want a show, now I have nothing to gain from this. It is one of the best shows to learn medical terminology because they use it correctly and they don't dumb it down. So you probably don't understand 90% of the medical terms that they're using, but the best way to learn a new language is to hear it be spoken. And House, especially in the later episodes, the medical terminology is spot on. Spot on. I've never seen another medical show that even came close. So if you have some time and you want to do some kind of alternative work in your medical terminology, go in and watch a couple episodes of House. And the reason I bring that up is because one of the episodes I watched last night was that had to do with the enzyme production. So
It's
here's,
Dr. House, right?
yeah, that the show is just called House, but he's a
He
doctor.
explains like of all the surgeries and other things that they do and the problems that they have. Like whenever the one that I've seen is like he gives them a medicine and sometimes it's not that, and then he ends up giving them something else, like with the reactions that they have and everything.
Yeah, he's the
Right?
guy that other doctors send the cases to that they don't have no idea what the person's wrong with them. So he's like this super smart rock star doctor guy. But it's a
He's a
great show.
diagnostician.
He is a diagnostician. So he's the one that diagnoses things that nobody else is able to. But when he's firing off ideas and chatting with his team, they're talking in nothing but medical terminology. And if you can even pick out parts of the word, you can start fitting it together and understanding. And it's really, really a neat feeling when you are listening to this and you understand everything that they're saying. And eventually you're going to start to understand some of the conditions that they're referring to. Like we were watching one over the weekend, I was kind of like, meh, meh, meh. And he started discussing, because at the end he always does like this convoluted, here's why I think it's this. And he's like, she has a communication between the right and left side of her heart. And I was like, patent ductus arteriosus. And not 3 seconds later, he's like, patent ductus arteriosus. And I'm like, whoa, what? So it was fun. Anyway, going back to our enzymes, key, they're like a lock and key. So specific enzymes are meant to turn specific things on and off. Again, no different than a light switch. If I flip the light switch on my wall, it's only going to affect the light in my office. It's not going to turn the lights in the hallway on or off. It's not going to turn anything in the basement on and off. Same thing here. Enzymes turn specific things on and off. And the way they do that is they fit just like a lock and a key. If you want another different analogy, here is the key to my car. This is the enzyme. If I take this enzyme and I try to put it in any other car in the parking lot, am I going to get a reaction? No, I can only put it in my car and get it to turn on or off. That's exactly like these enzymes. It's like a lock and a key, and it only controls the thing it's supposed to control. Finally, the last protein we have are called nucleic acids, and that's just a fancy word for saying super, super duper special amino acid. These nucleic acids are what build our DNA. In fact, DNA, you probably, if you've ever been through even like a 3rd grade biology class, you know it's deoxyribonucleic acid. That's just what it's made of. Now, this DNA is the blueprint for everything about you. It is how you function. It is how you replicate. It is how you destroy. It is what you pass on to your offspring. It is what they pass on to their offspring. And the crazy thing about DNA, there are only 4 nucleotides. That's it. 2 bond with each other and 2 bond with each other. And they can be in different sequences. And depending on the sequence, that's what gives us our different traits. In fact, we look
Are
at...
we talking about adenine and
Yes,
guanine?
we're talking
Okay.
about adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. Exactly. So these two of them join together and 2 of them join together. And the crazy thing is, think about our dogs. You have, I'm going to use my medical term, brachiocephalic, short face of like our bulldogs, the dolichocephalic, the long face of our Afghan hound, You have the curly Q tail of our French bulldog. You have the very long rudder tail of our Labrador. You have the super long flag tail of our Saluki. Ultimately, over 99% of all of those breeds have the exact same DNA. That's what makes them dogs and makes them canines. It's simply taking 0.1% of their DNA and changing the sequence that gives them this varied outward look. I find that fascinating. Anyway, so the DNA is found in the mitochondria. It is also found in the nucleus. RNA is where we split half of it off and take part of our instruction manual out so that we can give instructions. I think of, again, you guys have learned by now, I'm insanely visual. My world is a visual world. And I think of DNA sitting in the nucleus like the king or the queen. And all he does is he shouts out orders. The king, the queen does not work. They do not do stuff. They tell other people to do stuff. And that's exactly what happens. He makes a decree. I decree that we need to create more hemoglobin. And he writes out the decree and he sends the decree. And the little minions of the body go, oh, the king wants hemoglobin. Burr, 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 burr. And burr, 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 makes hemoglobin. That's essentially in a very simplified way exactly what's happening here. So that's kind of the difference between our DNA and our RNA. I have this one weird curl that has just decided to go rogue today. So I'm just going to pin him back because he's driving me insane. Do I have any comments, questions, concerns so far?
So I asked, there are 3 types of proteins, and it's structural, functional, and then nucleic acid is the 3rd type of protein.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So here's our nucleotides. And these are just where amino acids are the primary building blocks of protein. Nucleotides are the primary building blocks of DNA, which would be cytosine, thymine, adenine, and guanine. But again, don't write that stuff down. It's just you've heard these words before. We're going to talk a lot about those 4 nucleotides as well as uracil, which is the 5th nucleotide. He's kind of the unknown band member. He's only found in certain things.
It's like a bonus kid or something.
He is like a bonus kid. Uracil's only found in RNA. He replaces thiamine. But the other 3 are found in both RNA and DNA. So I'll give you guys a minute. And there's just a picture of the structure. I'm not going to have you reproduce this, just so you have seen it. Here's our nucleotides. As I was just saying, adenine and guanine, cytosine and thiamine. Now, these are going to be important. I do kind of want you to know these. Adenine, guanine, and cytosine are all 3 of those found in both DNA and RNA. Thiamine is only found in DNA, and then it transfers into this other thing called uracil when we're in RNA. So thiamine is only in DNA. Uracil is only in RNA. That would be, I think, a great multiple choice question. Which of the following is only found in RNA? And then I could put like adenine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. Now, as I said, 2 of these nucleotides bind with each other, and the other 2 bind with each other. How do I remember in DNA which is which? It's very simple. Apple tree, put your car in the garage. apple, tree, adenine binds with thiamine, put your car in the garage, cytosine binds with guanine. So if I ever asked you which binds with which, just remember apple, tree, put your car in the garage. I'll give you guys a minute. Let's see. We got a little bit more to go.
I have more of a question on the test yourself questions in the book.
Sure.
When it's talking about the nitrogenous bases, is that referring to the nucleotides, or I'm a bit confused on that question.
So nitrogenous usually is going to be referring to proteins. Proteins are primarily the backbone, obviously made up of amino acids, but their backbone is nitrogen. So when we talk about nitrogenous structures, generally we're talking about proteins in general. About 16% of structural and functional proteins are made of nitrogen. And in fact, we being omnivores, that's how we get our nitrogen that we need, is by eating the protein of other animals. So anytime you hear the word nitrogenous, referring to, or the production genesis, meaning the origination, nitrogen, generally you're going to be referring to just a general structure of a protein.
I'm sorry, which one does uracil go with?
Uracil is going to bind with adenine. Let me get my pen. But he only is found in RNA. So in DNA, if you watch this, apple, tree, put your car in the garage. So if I have half of a DNA, and I am going to go ahead and I'm just doing this at random, guys. So there's adenine, thymine, cytosine, a guanine, another cytosine, an adenine. Do you see how I can now, even though I've only filled in half of this DNA, do you see how we can fill in the blanks? Because if this is adenine, what does this have to be? Thymine. If this is thiamine, what does this have to be?
Adenine.
Yeah. If this one is cytosine, this has to be
Guanine.
There you go. And then again, guanine, this one has to be cytosine. Same thing here is another cytosine. We know that this one has to be guanine. Here we had another adenine. Here we have, look, guys, we just made DNA. We just made DNA. Now what can happen is if I need to send a proclamation, I am DNA, I am sending a proclamation. And let's say that right here, this happens to be the sequence that contains the instructions of the proclamation. I'm going to split that off. We'll go into the whole process behind that later. I'm going to split that off. Half is RNA. RNA is just simply the instructions that I'm now sending to the minions. But the thing is, when I detach this, our thiamine, get a different color here, converts into uracil. So thiamine, if you want to think about it again, super simply, thiamine is only thiamine when it's bonded with adenine. When we unbond it, it takes on a new identity, and that's going to be the uracil. So uracil is only found in RNA, and thiamine can only be thiamine when it's bonded. Therefore, it's only thiamine when it's bonded in DNA. So the minute that I unzip that DNA, the thiamine is no longer bonded, and he takes on this different persona. Everybody else stays the same. Does anyone have any questions about that? All right, you guys have been super patient. We've got about 5 cards left. And I'm going to finish those 5 first thing tomorrow, and then we're going to do a whole, so bring your questions, we'll do a whole review. Yeah, Joanna, however you need to remember it, I've always just found it very easy to remember it. Apple tree, put your car in the garage. A, T, C, and G. So however else you guys need to remember, that's just the little trick that I have. All right, so I'm going to